Okay, I have 7 o'clock. You ready, Karen?
I do.
Okay. I'd like to bring the January 14th, 2025 Planning Board meeting to order. Karen, if you could take roll call, please.
Ms. Claudia Bolgan?
Here.
Mr. Jim Callahan?
Here.
Mr. Kevin Donovan?
Here.
Mr. Dave Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Robert Klein?
Here.
Ms. Carolyn Turner?
Here.
Chair Bob Darty.
Here. Before the meeting begins, please silence your cell phones and note that this meeting is being recorded. The first order of business tonight is to elect a chair and a vice chair for 2025. So I'll entertain any nominations for chair. Claudia,
I nominate Bob Doherty as chair.
do I have any other nominations? Do I have a second on that? Any other nominations? Seeing none, I'll close the nominations for chair.
So moved.
Made by Claudia, second by Dave. All those in favor of Bob Doherty being chair again this year, please raise your hand. I was going to say 6-1, but no, it's 7-0.
Bob, thanks for your service.
I didn't vote against myself. Thank you, Claudia. And now nominations for vice chair. Anybody? Claudia?
I nominate Jim Callahan as vice chair.
Okay, Jim Callahan. Do I have a second on that? Any other nominations? Motion to close nominations for vice chair.
So moved.
Claudia, second by Dave. All those in favor of Mr. Callahan as vice chair? 7-0 carries. Congratulations, Jim. All right, first thing up. Lot line relocation plan of land, 10-12-14 Cross Street.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the applicant representative for this plan asked to be excused. He wasn't able to make the meeting.
Okay.
This plan involves the creation of two new lots, one with an existing duplex on it, and the other has a small structure known locally as a shop on that property. Is everybody following this particular plan? So the lot being created closest to the former railroad line, that's the new proposed lot, and the applicant informed me they were planning to build in the future on that property a duplex. But the A&R plan before you this evening, both lots do comply with the minimum lot size and frontage requirements for the zoning district.
Any questions, Director? Okay. John, do you have a recommendation?
I do have a recommendation the board would like to consider, and that would be to endorse this particular A&R plan.
So moved. Motion by Dave to accept the Director's recommendation to endorse this A&R plan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Carolyn. All those in favor? 7-0 carries. Second item is an approval not required, 225 Merrimack Street.
Good evening. For the record, Attorney Joseph Tabby, Woburn and Rudman, 500 Unicorn Park Drive in Woburn. On behalf of the applicant, New Boston Real Estate, LLC. So, as you look at the plan, just to give you an idea what where we are here is the, as you look at the plan, the lot on the upper left, that is the former Landscape Express that was operated many years, where they mulched the trees and landscape materials. And at the very bottom, that building there is the waste management building. So in both 2022 And this past May of 2024, the planning board endorsed two A&R plans that resulted in lot, what is shown on the plan, proposed lot 71 and proposed lot 72, which were formerly lot 14, which was lot 72, and lot 71 was lot 70. Approved an A&R plan that removed the internal lot line from both of those lots. So all this plan seeks to do is add back in the lot line and create the two lots, which would be lot 71 and lot 72. Both having frontage on Merrimack Street, with lot 71 having frontage on Merrimack Street and New Boston Street, both public ways.
Okay. Any questions of Attorney Tobey? Seeing none? Have a recommendation from the director?
Yes, in accordance with Mr. Tarby's presentation, this is a rather simple lot line relocation, reestablishment of former lot lines, and I recommend that the board consider endorsing this particular A&R plan.
So moved.
Motion by Dave to accept the director's recommendation of endorsing the A&R plan. And second on that?
Second.
Second by Jim. All those in favor? 7-0 carries. Thank you. Up next, we have a public hearing. This is on a zoning map and text amendment, Central Square Overlay District. Stan, we have a presentation.
We're going to need a minute, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
We're going to need a couple minutes to set this up.
Okay. All right, we'll just talk amongst ourselves.
Give you acceptance speech.
Talk about this whole thing.
Yes, while the applicant is setting up the presentation this evening, say the first order of business, a reading of the public hearing notice. Would board members like me to do that?
Please.
Okay. City of Woburn, notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that under provisions of the Woburn zoning ordinance and Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Woburn Planning Board will hold a public hearing this evening, Tuesday, January 14th, 2025, at 7 p.m. in the City Council Chambers, City Hall, Woburn, Mass., on a petition by the owner of 660 Main Street, Woburn, Mass., as well as the owners of the parcels listed below, that I will read, that are included in this rezoning petition, which calls to amend the 1985 zoning ordinances as amended by adopting a new zoning ordinance overlay district, Section 35, entitled Central Square Overlay District, in parentheses, CSOD. The map that is included with the addresses involved with this proposed rezoning include, on the city assessor's map, the parcels included in this rezoning petition, 654 Main Street, map lot and lot number 360931, 658 Main Street, block 36, or I should say map 36, block 03 and lot 1, 662 Main Street, 360302, 664 Main Street, map 36, block 3 and lot 3, 668 Main Street, map 36, block 03, lot 04, and then 670 Main Street, map 36, Block 03, and Lot 5. 2 Lowell Street, map 36, Block 3, and Lot 6. 4 Lowell Street, map 36, Block 3, and Lot 3. A couple more here. 10 Lowell Street, map 36, Block 3, and Lot 8. 12 Lowell Street, map 35, Block 11, and Lot 6. 14 Lowell Street, map 35, Block 11, and Lot 7. And 16 Lowell Street, map 35, Block 11, and Lot 8. And then finally, 660 Main Street, map 35, Block 11, and Lot 5. And then I'll go on real quickly. As described in the subject petition, the purpose for the Central Square Overlay District is to encourage the redevelopment of underutilized properties. This overlay district shall require that all new uses allowed in said overlay district shall be approved by a majority affirmative vote of the city council via a special permit, site plan, or both. That's it.
Thank you, John.
Okay, good evening. For the record, Attorney Joseph Tabby, Woburn and Redmond, 500 Unicorn Park Drive in Woburn. Here on behalf of the applicant Gustafino Realty LLC. So with me this evening is John Tocci of Gustafino Realty, Peter Carbone of Foxfield, and the second row, Nick Delacava of Allen and Major. So although this evening the public hearing is for a zoning amendment and a zoning map amendment, our development team, when I'm done going over the technical aspects of the proposal, will provide you with an overview of the development it would like to proceed forward with in the event the zoning amendment and zoning map amendment are approved. So as a reminder, this is the first step in the process. So when we have a zoning amendment, there are public hearings required before the planning board and the city council. City council has a public hearing scheduled next Tuesday. The city council cannot approve any zoning amendment until it receives a recommendation from the planning board. So once the planning board is finished with its process and forwards a recommendation to the city council next Tuesday, after the conclusion of its public hearing, will forward the amendments to the ordinance committee for further review. And the ordinance committee will wait for the planning board recommendation and then further review the proposed zoning amendment and subsequently vote out to the full council that they either going to approve it or they recommend disapproval. Assuming it's approved, then the petitioner would have to file a special permit petition. That involves further public hearings, that involves further review by planning board staff, committee meetings, peer reviewers that are appointed to review whether it's a traffic study or a drainage study. So there's a lot of work ahead with this zoning amendment. So in terms of context and location of the property, as Mr. Cashel read into the record the public notice, the area to the left is the area that is being proposed as part of this overlay district. Okay, it consists of a number of residential properties and the Gustafino building shown on the right side of the screen that is in the middle of the property. Some of the property is zoned R1, some of the property is zoned S1. The picture on the right shows you some of the properties along Main Street that would be redeveloped into a first-class housing. So the purpose of the overlay, it's set forth in more detail in the actual ordinance, but is to one, promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community by encouraging the redevelopment of the Central Square area. Also to ensure high-quality site planning, architecture, and landscape design, provide diversified housing, and encourage adoption of energy-efficient building practices and sustainable construction methods. So this is the zoning map that was filed with the zoning map amendment, which Mr. Cascio identified all the properties that are part of the Central Square Overlay District. Okay, so you all have a copy of the proposed zoning amendment. I'm not going to go through and read the amendment line by line, but would like to review some of the important components of it. So the uses that would be allowed by special permit within the overlay district would be residential use. And keep in mind that there's already office use and light manufacturing use already operating on the premises. There'd be medical, dental offices would be allowed, light manufacturing, research and testing, retail under 10,000 square feet, and any accessory uses to any of those principal uses. Now, in terms of dimensional regulations, the minimum district size for this overlay district is 5 acres. We have a minimum setback along Main Street of 10 feet. And as you see the proposed development, you'll understand. Minimum front yard setback of 15 feet, side yard setback of 25 feet, rear yard 25. Maximum building coverage, 40%. Landscape open space, 25%. And a maximum number of residential units at 225 units. Minimum parking requirements per unit are 1.5, which seem to be the figure that's been used recently on other housing developments. And parking for the non-residential uses would be 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. The maximum building height along Main Street would be 39 feet, 3 floors. And the maximum height of the buildings behind the buildings on Main Street would be 65 feet with 5 floors. The ordinance also requires compliance with other sections of the zoning ordinance, such as the Wetlands Protection Act, the mitigation requirements of Section 18, floodway requirements, and affordable housing requirements in Section 11.11. So 15% of the units would be required to be affordable units, and also the stretch energy code. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to John Tocci of Gustafino Realty, the owner of this beautiful property here, and he'll give you some background on the Gustafino building, and then we'll get into our proposed development. So, John.
Thank you, Joe. Chairman Doherty, thank you. Board members, thank you for listening to our plans. Director Cashel, thank you. When we purchased this property, we purchased it actually from the Carbonis family in 1989, actually, I think, 1999. So I think that date is wrong. It was 26 years ago, and we were located at 130 New Boston Street at the time. We had built that building and developed that building with a Swedish developer, and we were looking for our own property. And I spied this building as I was driving down Wyman Street, looking down a passageway to an covered building that you see on the lower right-hand side. And I said, where where did this building come from? I never knew that it was here. And it turns out that I would bet that about a third of the population of Woburn at that time didn't know that this building was there. The young population knew about it because they called it Gussie's, and that's where they would, that's where they would hang out and they would drink and do other things about 30 or 40 years ago. But when we found it, there was 12 different uses in the building. A Martin's TV, which we all used from time to, or the older people used from time to time when TVs had tubes in them, and 11 other uses. Small engine repair shop was on the lower floor. There was a dance studio upstairs. Brugger's Bagels had their corporate headquarters upstairs, and there was a bunch of disparate uses. And the building looked like it did in the upper right-hand corner as well, which had different parts that were tattooed onto the original historic building, including a clay storage shed. At one time, there was a railroad spur that came off of the canal tow road. When the canal was built, it was in operation from 1880 to 1850 and then stopped, and the tow road for the canal boats was converted to a railroad, as many of you know. And that's what attracted Raphael Guastavino from New York to come here. I still don't really understand why. He was a famous ceramicist and a famous engineer. He got 24 different patents on a unique way to do arches that you see in the lower right corner. He did federal buildings. He did major buildings like Ellis Island, the Registry Building. He did the Queensboro Bridge in New York that was so beautiful that subsequently they closed it in and turned it into both a restaurant and an upscale grocery because the underside, the tile work on the underside of the bridge was just so stunningly beautiful. He ultimately went on, he bought the property, and he built the building that you see in the upper left-hand corner in 1907. And in this factory, he had two-story kilns, and he would produce about 100,000 terracotta tiles, very special tiles that were ribbed and that complied with his patent requirements. Every day he would run, at the peak of his operation, would run 3 shifts all around the clock. So in 1960, it shut down, the factory shut down and then went through various uses. The Carboni family bought it and tried to redevelop it and tenant it, and then ultimately we bought it because we fell in love with it. We fell in love with what the building was and what we thought the building could be, and also what the square could be. So we went about the process of stripping off the additive pieces and restoring the building. So we kept the history in place. So the one-story element that you see, this is actually the back side of the building. The front side of the building faced the canal. The back side of the building faced the parking lot. And so we restored the back side, but preserved the front side. The tile that you see in the upper right-hand corner was hidden, was all blocked over. There was acoustical tile shot through it, and we restored all of that. And the entryway that you see, I don't know if I can actually, okay, the mouse is here. The entryway that you see here, we restored that, and we actually built this tile, which is tile that was made and fired in the same spirit as Guastavino. There's one place in New York that actually still crafts tile the way that he prescribed it to be. The Guastavino signature is on the entryway, and he would often do that in his buildings, basically sign his name in pieces of tile. It's pretty amazing. So I could go on too long. I've already gone on longer than my team wants me to, but I really love this building. And I love the property as well. When we first moved here, we sensed that this building was a gem hidden behind properties that were neglected for sometimes a couple of generations. And the fire station, we are builders. The company is a family-owned company, dates back to 102 years ago when my grandfather and his two brothers started the company. And we've grown to the point where we do fairly large projects. And we would have clients from all over the country coming to visit us as we were talking to them about their projects. And sometimes they would show up at the fire station and say, "Where are you? Are you in this fire station?" And so we were a little bit embarrassed by the fire station because we had spent a lot of money to make the property look kind of nice. So we were pretty excited when the fire station got retired. And we had the opportunity to purchase the fire station. 25 years ago, we started selectively, strategically buying properties one at a time when they became available, because we had this vision that we could somehow restore that quadrangle, which we believe is what the original property was, that went all the way out to Main Street that Guastavino sold, reassemble it and do something special in this area. And that's what we're before you today to talk about, doing something special for this area. And we hope that it is the beginning of a more global vision for the whole Central Square area. When we first started this conversation with several city council members back 5 or 6 years ago, we had images of how we would replace or upscale Jack's Variety. And certainly we would like to see the vaping store find some other place to be than there. And so we hope that what we're proposing before you will cause and stimulate similar quality development. So I'll be quiet. I think that's as far as I'm supposed to go, right? I'll pass this over to Peter Carboni, who's the professional development person.
Thanks, John. For the record, Peter Carboni, happen to be a real estate attorney, but also a lifelong resident of Woburn. It's good to see many of you here. It's been a while since I've been before the planning board, as I was talking to Ms. Turner beforehand. So kind of glad to be back. I was probably been working on this for close to 2 years now with John and his team, and was excited when he asked about getting involved for a number of reasons. Having grown up cleaning a lot of this property when my parents and uncles bought it back in the late 70s or whatever, brought back a lot of memories. And looking at what Central Square has kind of become compared to what it was when we were kids running around, I think we would all agree it's probably time for some changes and some upgrades to it. So hopefully this project gives a chance to start to revitalize that area. You're going to have some things come up down the road on the Wyman School that'll be coming up and those type of things, as well, I think pretty soon. So hopefully we can do something good for what is another gateway into the city as you come in from 95 and head towards the beautiful Victorians downtown and so forth. So let me talk about the project, because John took a lot of my time anyway. So I think, John, did you mention we did have a couple of neighborhood meetings, or at least one neighborhood meeting. We've had many interactions with some city officials, some of the neighbors, to get input on what to build here or what to look at doing. How many of, just quick, how many of you have ever been on this property? I'm going to guess. So 2 out of 7 or 8. Not surprised. It's a little jewel. It's a 5 to 6 acre parcel. Pretty prominent location in the city, but nobody's ever been there. It's crazy. I would encourage everybody, if you get a chance, drive down there. It's a beautiful property, and the building's beautiful. Let me talk about the site plan. So before you right now is for the rezoning, but you're not going to consider the rezoning until you really take a hard look at what the project is being proposed. So to orient you a little bit, I wish I had my laser pointer, but I don't, unfortunately. I think everybody knows generally where we are. Main Street, I'm going to call it to the south. It's probably actually to the east. The Boys and Girls Club to the left, which a lot of Woburn residents had a hand in rebuilding that facility over the last 10 years or so, just off to the left. The canal to the top, and then Lowell Street as it comes down from Lowell and Wyman Street, kind of off to the right-hand side. First and foremost, the existing beautiful building that John described is not going anywhere. It's not intended to be really touched in any way. There may be some slight renovations as it relates to the amenity of the pool area on the inside, but it's such a beautiful building, nobody wants to change it. It was the first thing we heard from neighbors, residents. For those who've been there, please don't get rid of the building. So the building is not going anywhere. I think John mentioned, but maybe not, he was the winning bidder of the fire station back about a month or so ago. So I'm sure a lot of you probably saw that in the Times, so forth. So that is really an integral part of the project, as we're going to talk a little bit about some of the traffic improvements to the area. Without that, it really makes it difficult to realign Clinton Street and Main Street to be able to get in and out of this property efficiently. So now that that's been acquired, it should be a very worthwhile benefit for all concerned, not only us, but our neighbors I'll call it to the left, the Boys and Girls Club. Part of the plan here is that when you come into the site, you'll have a beautiful sense of arrival where residents can either go into one of their new homes, or you can go into the Boys and Girls Club. The intent here is that will become the primary access for the Boys and Girls Club. I don't think the other one will get closed. We haven't gotten that far yet. My guess is it'll probably be a right in, maybe a right out, or emergency, but I don't think it gets closed. But I think the other one will become more of the primary way in and out for the Boys and Girls Club. See if I can identify this with if I use this, scroll up. This driveway, or this area up here, right now it's closed off by bollards so that you can't use it. It's paved. It's only about 10 feet wide. I'm bringing it up because we are not intending to use it as an access drive for this project. The neighbors have been very clear they do not want it opened back up. If the city determines that it's really needed for emergency, then we can certainly have that conversation about getting in or out of that way, but it's not intended as the primary or even secondary way in or out of the project. The site plan calls for the two big buildings in the middle, the A and B, those two buildings, and then townhouses around the perimeter. We're still in the active rendering stage, if you will, to show the buildings and what they're going to look like. I apologize that we're not going to be able to present all of those architectural and elevation renderings for buildings A and B here today. We don't expect this meeting to conclude today, and we're hoping by the next one we'll be able to show you architecturally what those are going to look like. We do have some imagery for the townhomes. Building A in this scheme has about 93 units in it, 95 units, 5 stories. The thing to note about this location is the elevation of Main Street at the entranceway is around 120 from the height above sea level. The property then steps down, and Building A's floor elevation, first floor, will be about 10 feet lower than where Main Street sits. The site actually goes down almost another 10 feet in spots. There's almost 20 feet of elevation difference on this site. So as we talk about heights, at 5 stories or 65 feet, you almost subtract 10 feet off of that as you look at it from where, as if you were on Main Street. In fact, the properties along Main Street on the other side of Main Street, the Wyman School, the apartment building just to the left of that, and then the other homes, will likely still be taller than almost anything we build on this property. And certainly even the townhomes that we plan on building are going to be very consistent with what's there today. All the other dimensional parking requirements will comply with the bylaw as Joe went through for the dimensional regs and so forth. The use of the existing building, I believe John's intent is to keep the construction company there. There may be some space on the lower level to lease up. I believe some of that's currently vacant, but that will likely be some other sort of office light assembly type use. And then you'll have the residential around the property. The units along the front, there's about 10 buildings that are likely going to get demolished on the main street. And there's somewhere around 20 apartments, maybe a little bit more than that, in those 10 units. What you see there is 32 units of townhouses on the front. So I look at it as replacing about 10 structures, call it plus or minus 20 multifamily units, with what's on this plan is 32 units. Those are garage under, and then 2 levels of a townhouse, and then potentially a floor above that. So from the street, and I'm going to show you some architecturals of those are really three-story buildings, consistent with what's up and down Main Street. And then again, A and B, those buildings are 5 stories and 65 feet in height, likely flat roofs on top of those. Let me show. So again, just for kind of design context, I think I'm sure you've all been by this, even though you haven't been by the site, or on the site, you've been by this many, many times. These are some of the buildings. The tops of those gables on those houses measure somewhere around 32 to 35 feet in height today. The roofs that I'm going to show you for the design that we've come up with are within 4 or 5 feet of those. This is looking looking north from almost the Boys Club, across the street from the Boys Club entranceway. Fire station on the left, again, that John has purchased, and then the rest of the properties as you look down the street. This is a rendering looking the same direction. So this would be, the fire station would have been on your left, sort of where those 2 people are walking. These buildings are a little closer to the street than they're actually going to be. There's a 10-foot setback. This isn't a perfect rendering yet in terms of they're likely going to get moved back a little bit on this rendering. But you can see the 3-story nature that the 3rd floor incorporates an entire unit. So you can kind of see the roof line matches pretty much the height of that gable that sticks out, given it that it sort of brings it down to almost look a little bit more like a 2.5-story building. But they're 3-story buildings. In each one of the 4 buildings, there's in essence 4 side-by-side units within a duplex and then a top. So take that one on the corner, for example. You'd have a garage under that you can't see from here because the way the topography works, you're going downhill. So as you go in and down around the driveway, you go around the back and you can go in your drive. Each unit will have parking spaces in the garage. And then the first 2 levels there are a townhouse, and then the top unit is like another unit. Those units are going to be somewhere, the top unit's 1,200 square feet plus or minus, the bottom unit's somewhere 2,200 square feet in that range. When we first started, I think so this is a view from the other direction. So as if you were across from Jack's, or the old Jack's. This is a view of what it would look like going forward. So again, you see the 4 different building structures with the park, and we're going to spend some time talking about the park on the right-hand side. You can just catch a glimpse if you look on the far right-hand side of what I was looking at, calling Building B on the other rendering. It's just sort of behind the tree on the right-hand side. So you can really just get a glimpse. You're really not going to see much of the buildings in the back because of the way the geometry is going to work, because you're driving down the street with a 35-foot building, in essence, blocking those 2 buildings in the back. So what are we trying to bring to the neighborhood? So a number of project benefits that will come about. When we opened the Harold Wyman School, which is just probably less than a quarter mile up the street, up Lowell or Wyman, I forget which one, we probably have 30 kids that walk to the Boys Club every day on school days as part of the after-school program. So you can see some of the trails or the pathways that will get upgraded for the kids to better be able to traverse from the Harold Wyman over to the new Boys and Girls Club. And then the ability to walk, to and from the site to either get to the retail across the street, to get up Main Street. The one across the back is the bike path along the canal that I know the city is planning to upgrade at some point. I'm not exactly sure where that stands in terms of a construction timeframe, but I know that's part of the plan. One of the important things I haven't talked about yet is the potential closure of Lowell Street, the little piece of Lowell Street in front of I'll call it the top townhouse. So we've all driven down from Wynn Street, Lowell Wyman Street, come out at the end, and sort of taken that right as you go in front of what was Jack's, and you kind of have to turn your neck almost all the way behind you to see. We put it out there with the neighbors and others to see if they would, how they thought about maybe getting rid of that cut through and making it pedestrian as part of the plaza. So that's one of the major benefits of the plan here, is where that black line is basically the street edge of Lowell Street today. This shows where the park will be expanded from about 15,000 square feet today to about 25,000 square feet. It's not something we're taking, we will help with the design and implementation of this. We're not looking for it to become part of our project. It's not like we want to, as a developer, to be handed this and say, here, this is now part of your project. In essence, it's an amenity for the entire area. We have a great architectural firm, landscape architectural firm, Copley Wolf, that's working on the design for this, and we should at the next meeting be able to even show some potential design components for how the park can get upgraded. But this should be a big amenity for the area and part of the project. Traffic, we have a traffic memo, almost full-blown traffic study done at this point for the project. I suspect we'll probably get into that as we talk more about the project itself. I'm glad to take any questions about it. Primarily, there's two major upgrades that the traffic engineers have recommended for the project. The first really being, with the now purchase of the fire station, is to line up Clinton Street and that intersection directly in. It solves a number of different things, including multi-phase timing. So right now, anybody that's been through, they know you have to stop 50 feet or so before the intersection to let cars come out of there. So obviously, we'll fix that situation. And then at Eaton Ave and Wilcox, which there's also a multi-phase timing that's happening there because of the way the geometry is just not lined up. So what we're proposing to do, this figure's kind of turned the other way from what you were just looking at, but as you come down from Eaton Ave, from the top side with the Wyman School there, just underneath it, this would basically realign the bottom of Eaton Ave to better directly line up with Wilcox Circle directly on the other side, so you can get away from the multi-phased signalization. It also adds a dedicated right-hand turn lane off of Wilcox onto Main Street. So as you're coming from the Burlington side, let's say, of Wynn Street down Lowell, and you hit Wilcox, again, the green, you will be getting rid of that Lowell Street extension, in front of the project, and you'll be adding that right-hand turn lane. I don't think any private land's necessary to do this. I think it's all public. I think everything that is in bright green there is owned by the city. So I don't think there will need to be any easements or takings to do this. So these are some of the traffic improvements that will be done as part of the project to increase the level of service for these intersections, even that are needed today, even without the project. These are improvements that really should be done. This is not 100% accurate, only because we have the rotary inside our property, and this is an earlier version, but the importance of this is to show the alignment between Clinton Street and getting into the site. So Clinton Street, which comes down now, and you can see the existing driveway that says abandoned existing Wyman Place, just to the top side of the new driveway. The driveway gets slid down 50 feet or so to line up better, and then you have the entranceway into the Boys and Girls Club on the lower side, and then the top side into the project. This was illustrative, more to show you how the alignment will be done with Clinton and Main Street, as opposed to what's going on just inside the project, but an important piece. Fiscal impacts, once we get into the special permit, we'll have to do a development impact statement, which is going to require a number of different things. One of them will be a full-blown fiscal impact study. So this is just, we have engaged a group to do it. They've done sort of a first pass at it. These are just some of the very high points in terms of what some of the benefits will be. Your taxes are going to go up almost tenfold, on the site, and that includes both real estate taxes and about 80 to 90,000 of vehicle excise tax. So the real estate tax will be somewhere around $450,000 estimated as we go forward, but it's about a tenfold jump in tax revenue for the city. Somewhere around $1 million in building permit fees and others that will be generated as well. I think that goes through the project. I think the only other thing I just mentioned briefly, we've had a number of conversations with both staff as well as some of the neighbors around traffic, drainage, all those kinds of things. We're prepared to talk about anything that you'd like to. Drainage is a particular issue for the neighborhood. Just there's issues along Hart Street and others that we fully recognize and have talked to the neighbors about. And we can get into that as much or as little as we want, or talk about as part of the project. What I can assure you is our project will comply fully with all the stormwater management regulations, including, right now, a large, vast proportion of the runoff on the site just sheet flows down to the canal. And there's very, very little treatment of it, not many catch basins and so forth. That will all be changing as we go with the project. So glad to get into that, but it may be more applicable as we go forward with the planning stage of the project itself. But we just want to be cognizant that we're very cognizant of the issue and so forth. And I'm sure we have some neighbors here today that might even like to talk about the issue. So with that, we've spent a lot of time. I'm going to turn it back to Joe or to the members for questions. Thank you.
At this point, we'll entertain questions from the board, presenters. Jim?
Mr. Cabone, can you please bring up the plan of the Wilcox Circle area? And I'd like to understand clearly, that'll do fine. The area that you're proposing in green on the bottom of the page, Wilcox Circle, is that part of your property?
I don't believe that is part of our property. I think that's all municipal.
That's a city street currently.
I believe so. I haven't looked at the title recently, but I believe, let's assume that's the case.
And we're depicting your build-out from the left-hand side of that green strip running left to right, downward on the page. Also, looks like there's land taking on the front of the Wyman School tract of land. That's in green also.
Yeah, I don't know if that will necessarily need, I believe it's all municipal. I don't know if it will need to be a taking or an easement for the city to implement it. And how much, do we know how many square feet roughly that? We don't know yet, do we? You can see underneath where the current curb line is. So it does propose to move that probably about 10 feet over, so.
Trying to understand your plan here. You're looking for an overlay district.
Right,
Is that incorporating the Wyman School property?
no.
It is not including the Wyman School property. Why is it being presented?
The only reason,
Same thing with the Wilcox Circle
sure.
traffic. If it's not part of your proposal, we should not be considering it at this point.
So the only reason they're on there is basically mitigation for the project itself. So for our project is to provide some mitigation for traffic that may be generated from our project and in the area, that this would be a good place to help mitigate that.
So what we're trying to do, Jim, is show you what the proposed project would be in connection with presenting the zoning amendment. The areas that you see, They would all have to be part of a traffic study done by a traffic engineer, surveyed, and presented to the city council if it gets that far.
How many trips do you know offhand are gonna be generated by these five-story buildings and back?
A net new of about 850. It's about 72 peak hour, which is you can do the math, one to two a minute in the morning. Let me analogize it to Place Lane. So we all know where Place Lane is, we've been by it a million times. Place Lane is somewhere between 150 and 160 units. I've seen two different numbers, so 155 units, let's say. The ITE numbers for that generate somewhere around 700 trips a day, somewhere in that range. But the observed number is almost 40% lower than that number. And this is all detailed in the traffic report that we're glad to provide, provide you all to look at. So, but just to answer your question directly, that's roughly the vehicle trips. And I think that's the net new number based on what we already have today for the residences out front that we'll be getting rid of.
I can appreciate your comments. I'm just looking at concepts that are out there, and there are conversations have been had, obviously,
Yep.
about redevelopment of the Lyman School and that whole general area. And if
Yeah.
we're gonna do an overlay district, in my opinion, you should be considering all of those factors before we do it, so we don't have, office parks behind residential like we do in other sectors of the city, which are very troublesome. Instead of doing this piecemeal. That's my point of view, but thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else? I have a quick question. So, the overlay district that we're looking at, the pieces of property, unless I'm looking at it wrong, that there's like 7 or 8 owners of the properties?
Along Main Street.
Right. So,
Yeah.
you don't own those properties?
So let me try to summarize, and then John can correct me.
Okay.
So John and the Tachi family own 660, which is the larger.
Yeah.
There is 10 or 11 more. I believe there are only 2 properties that they either do not own right now, that they have been in discussions with about purchasing, and then maybe a third. Is that right? That's correct. So of all of those in that picture, I think there's about, what is there, 12, Joe? 13?
13 properties.
13 properties. I can't really read that from where I'm sitting, but I think the third or fourth one from the top side, and then one in the middle, that they currently do not own. And one of them they have under purchase and sale, so I consider that they have at least control of it, so a little bit,
Okay,
more.
so the list I have is outdated.
Yeah, they've been purchasing all through the last number of months, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if the last couple of people hold out?
What's that?
What if the last couple of people hold out?
We'll have to figure it out. Yep.
Well, it kind of puts the whole thing to,
Well, we could go around
Part
them.
of it to rest.
We'd have to amend the site plan, and it's doable. I'm not sure it's the best plan for us or for the city, but it is doable. Some of the locations of the townhouses that we selected are done for a reason, in case we can't do one.
Yeah.
So we've thought it through.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add one point too. There is language in the zoning amendment that states if a property does not participate within the overlay district, it doesn't impact the underlying zoning. So that property can do whatever it can do now under the current zoning. It doesn't get adversely impacted in terms of zoning by this overlay district.
so the overlay district would go like this and then go around this person's house?
Well, no,
back up and-
no, it'd still be included within the overlay district,
But
but
they wouldn't have,
it would not eliminate the underlying zoning for that property. So if it's in the R2,
okay, if it's an R1, they can't all of a sudden put up an office building in their property just because they're in this overlay district.
Correct.
And that wording is in there.
right,
People can, in essence, choose which district they want to be in. They can stay in the underlying, or they could look to one of the uses that are allowed in the overlay. Once they go to the overlay, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, once they go to the overlay, they can't go back.
correct, yeah.
So,
Any other questions from any board members at this moment? Seeing none at this moment, it is a public hearing, so I will invite anyone from the public to come up and speak for or against, or just get their points across. When you come up, please state your name and address and sign the little paper book that we have down there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Curran. I live at 2 Wyman Street. I've been a butter to this property for the entirety of my life, 58 years. So I'm very familiar with the property. I played baseball there as a kid, hung around and allegedly did some of the less reputable things before a couple of Thanksgiving games or two in my youth. I don't do that anymore, though. I'm too old. But I wanted to come up and talk about, I'm usually on your side of the fence here. I'm usually working on the municipal side, so it's not often that I find myself as a resident talking about these things. So to keep in mind, the big picture here, which was pointed out by the petitioner, which is that the property in Central Square is, for lack of a better word, or diplomatic word, is a little tired. There's some properties along Main Street that clearly are underutilized, that could be used better. And then the property itself down at Gusty's is, there's opportunity there as well. But all that being said, there has to be a balance. And the balance, I think, is that you have to preserve the intent down there, which is it's a business neighborhood. It's a very nice neighborhood. It's, for those of us who grew up in the area and, spent time at the Boys and Girls Club, that area is unique in that, Jack's Variety has been there for many years, and people still go there. You don't find a neighborhood store that much anymore. So we want to try to preserve that character. I think some of the things that have been presented here tonight go to that end, to try to preserve the character of the neighborhood. I just want to point out a few things. I'll talk about the zoning, and then the plan itself, even though it's really not before you, but they're all interrelated. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about the zoning. The zoning proposal, I think clearly that is probably something that was presented by the petitioner that's not new. It was probably used somewhere else. I think that one thing that jumped out at me is that the control for site plan and for special permit is vested in the city council. Myself personally, I think site plan should be vested with the planning board, because the planning board has more expertise and resources in those areas, and I think site plan should go with the planning board. I know that makes for a less, streamlined process for the petitioner, but in this case, I think it would protect the interests of the neighborhood by doing it that way. A few other things I noticed in the zoning. Bear with me for 1 second. So there are a lot of uses that are allowed by right in the zoning petition as presented, and I heard through the presentation that research and testing and light manufacturing, some of that stuff actually exists or did exist on that site in the past. Maybe we should think about not having so many uses on that site down there, because frankly, some of these uses are not going to work in the back down at Gusty's anymore, because if you're going to insert that level of housing down there, then I don't think you need to jam all these other uses in there. I'm not saying there isn't an opportunity for some of them, but I think some of these don't need to be there. Then the other thing that concerns me is the solar energy systems that are called out in 34.5 uses. Roof mounted, I'm okay with that, but when you start talking about carports and ground mounted, small scale, medium scale, large scale solar panels, so those are for like solar farms. So I don't think that's an appropriate spot for a solar farm. The carports, selfishly, I think they're ugly. I know they serve a great purpose, but if you look at the plan, those carports are gonna be backed up against my property. And I don't wanna be looking at them from 3 seasons out of the year to have those big metal structures that are, that would be there. So I don't see a need for that in the zoning proposal, because I don't think that's the primary intent of the petitioner. I think that's probably just something that was in there from the previous draft of this bylaw, zoning ordinance, excuse me, I'm mixing up my municipalities. Looking at the height restrictions, 3 feet, 3 stories on the street, I think that's probably appropriate, but 5 stories in the back, I think that might be too high, which then speaks to the density. The density of these properties, it's talking about 225 units. I think that's too many for this area. I think it should be reduced. And just, can I use your presentation here for a second?
Just use the left or right.
Right there, right? I'll use this slide here, but if you're coming down Clinton Street and there's the fire station there, those 2 things aren't gonna be there anymore because there's gonna be a road going in. Here it is. And if you look at this plan here, you could cut out some of that building and it would give you a sight line directly to the back of Gustavino's property, which wouldn't be a bad thing, because as the petitioner has mentioned, most people don't know what's back there, so it would be nice to be able to see it. So if you had to reduce some of the density of this property, you could take some of the corner of that building off and open up that area so that you could actually see straight into Gustavino's property and see the old building there. That really is a hidden gem in the community. These buildings here on the street, they're I like to preserve the houses that are right on the street. 0 setbacks, I think, are a good thing in this type of a neighborhood. This is a little deceiving here. They look like 4 elevator apartment buildings, but they're really not if you look at the elevation. So there's the elevation there. That looks nice, and I like that, but I would just ask that you go, oops. Oh, there it is. So in the back of the building, Mr. Tachi has incorporated some nice modern features, but also highlighted the historic, history of the building. So incorporating some of that into the buildings that are on the street could echo the history in the area and capture what, the significance of this neighborhood. So some of those things, those are more aesthetic things that will be dealt with throughout the process. And that's kind of where I want to finish up is the process. It's difficult because you pass a zoning code, a zoning ordinance, don't misconstrue that to mean that this is what you're going to get, because that's a whole different process. That's a special permit process. They could theoretically, I'm not saying he's going to do this, but theoretically, they could come in with something completely different that complies with the zoning the way it was written. So I would personally like to see that most of the details and the elements of this plan are worked out far in advance of the city council or the planning board actually adopting this zoning code, because you want to make sure that the bird in the hand is better than the bird in the bush. So if you want to know what you're getting and that there be clarity in what you're getting, I think you should work out the details and make sure that both the petitioner and the city understand what's going to happen on that site and off that site. I think that's going to involve talking to legal counsel on some of the conditions that you can and cannot impose through the zoning process. So I would urge that you and the city council do that. Reach out to legal counsel and talk about what you could do. Things like restricting access, as it was mentioned, out onto Lowell Street, I think is something that if you can do it through the zoning, that would be great. I'm not sure that you can, but that's one element that I think is very important. And then all of the mitigation pieces, which will typically be dealt with through the special permit process. I heard Peter talking about, let me see if I can find it here. This area here, up on Eaton Ave in Wilcox Circle, I think what I got out of what you said is that you're not willing to foot the bill for that, but you're thinking about a MassWorks grant or something like that along the way. So, where I'm going is that although those things are being presented tonight, they're not guarantees. If you give them the zoning, that doesn't mean you're going to get all that infrastructure change, and it may not be approved as part of a special permit. So that's why I say it's important to work these things out prior to the zoning being changed. Once you give away the zoning, it's all over. And there are other things that can happen on that site. You know, I definitely think that there's a lot of opportunity for improvement in this neighborhood. And I'm not going to stand up here and, as you know, throughout my whole career, I've talked about how we need to incorporate mixed use and housing and say that I'm opposed to it, because I'm not. I'm not opposed to it. I think the density is a little bit aggressive. I'm very concerned about stormwater on the site, where it's going to go. There's one outlet that goes into the Middlesex Canal. In the back of the site, closer to the Boys and Girls Club, what's going to happen with that is the walking path, which is now the railroad bed. That could be part of the project as well. I think they mentioned part of that. That doesn't have to be that expensive. That's something that they could incorporate into the project. Into traffic study, they mentioned the traffic study. I hope that the traffic study is peer reviewed, and that you do that prior to changing any zoning. And I think the bottom line is this is a good first step, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. You know, I'll make myself available to anybody who's interested, and I'll follow the process. And I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Feel free.
Hello, Cynthia Tachi, not a coincidence. I live at 16 Lowell Street, which is abutting this property. I want to bring a couple of things to the attention. The reworking of Lowell Street, I think, would be very good, because I have a friend who actually got in a car accident, because when you come over there, you don't really have a definitive yield. And I see people coming around that corner thinking they have the right of way to go right onto Main Street, and it's a bit hairy. So getting rid of that, I think, would be a good idea. I'm also on the facilities committee at the Boys and Girls Club, and they are very keen on getting the new entry. When the kids are being picked up, the backup, for anyone who wants to take a right turn, they're good, but if they're taking a left turn onto Main Street, it's 10 minutes before they can get a clear shot. So a new egress with a cleaned up intersection there would not only get rid of that nasty little intersection where you stop and you don't know where you're stopping and it's stop and go, but it would also help the Boys and Girls Club to get out. And I think we all agree that those houses on Main Street, most of them really have to go, and or they're not savable. They're really not savable. So to do something like that, to get those townhouses up, to make a nice little entry into downtown Woburn, I think would be a plus for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I get you to sign that, please? Is there a pen there?
No, there's no
Did John come and steal the pen? John?
Lord, don't trust him.
Good evening. My name is Greg Burlingame. I live a little further down Wyman Street on Sheila Ave, 5 Sheila Ave. Tonight I came just to express, first off, big fan of the plans. I love what you're doing with the development. I did have one concern, though, about the traffic mitigation, but maybe that's not really the right time. What I see in the illustrations doesn't really make any sense. The sort of smallish right turn lane, the closure of Lowell. I do agree with what was said earlier about the trickiness of Lowell right now. I just feel like the current plan that I see in the illustration doesn't really seem tenable. There's a lot of traffic there that backs up, actually past where Lowell Street is quite regularly. So I just think there needs to be a little bit of work done there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Nobody at the moment? Okay. Any further discussion from the board? John?
I just want to point out that John Curran brought up a lot of good points. Absolutely. You know, food for thought for sure. I mean, he has a ton of experience in this. So really appreciate hearing from you, John, on this. And that's another good point about that traffic lane you're talking about. It is rather short, and you know, there is a lot of traffic out there that needs to be properly managed. And I'd just like to say, you know, as in the report to the board this evening that I wrote, there's a lot to think about. You know, if it was a couple of years ago and the Wyman School wasn't at the forefront of this proposal, but it is. So I pointed that out in the staff report for this evening's meeting. The city really has to start thinking, you know, broadly for this part of the city, Central Square. And it's just not the Wyman School. There is discussion publicly about north and south on Main Street, north and south of the Wyman School. That may very well, those properties may very well come into, you know, existence as, say, a mini master plan of this entire area. So we have to properly manage the future traffic improvements, not just, say, for this project, but think along terms of, you know, the impact on the Wyman School property being developed. And that's also more of a multifamily residential future than a mixed use. So most people are thinking along the terms of townhouse development. There might be elderly development on that property, but nobody knows for sure. We got to go through that whole process that you've been working how many years on?
About 10 years now.
Yeah, but you said earlier you've been envisioning this project.
Oh, we've been envisioning it for 26 years.
Yeah, I remember when I was here last, that you and I met and discussed, you know, and I thought only public I thought only public projects took this long to plan, but, you know, I guess it goes into the private sector once in a while too, so.
Is this a new thing where the director banters with the?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
sorry, but,
I didn't know.
you know, there's just so much to think about with this project.
Director's time.
Yeah, direct this time.
But I agree with you, John. This is a lot to digest quickly. So if there are no questions from any of the board members at the moment, do I have a recommendation from the director?
Yeah, maybe twofold. I did suggest in the staff report that board members may want to create an ad hoc committee just to look at the proposed zoning ordinance itself. I looked at it, I read it a couple of times. I'd say it needs quite a bit of work and honing. And Mr. Curran pointed out, you know, a lot of good points that, you know, the city should take into consideration. Because, you know, we're creating an overlay district, so we're creating it, as he pointed out, for what the owner is thinking about. But economies change and things change, and, you know, if you do have a multitude of uses allowed within the zoning, you know, things could change, and it would all be in accordance with what the zoning ordinance provides for. So I think if we, you know, really hone in on, you know, what it is that, you know, the city wants on that property, it wants to pretty much guarantee what it will be in the future to the extent possible. That's what we ought to work on. And, you know, we should really bring in the city solicitor to help us with that review. So that's my recommendation in that regard. As far as the traffic peer review is concerned, we may want to work in conjunction with the city council on that. You know, that may be a matter that this board wants to consider this evening. When it does go to committee, council committee, that we have a joint meeting of the planning board, if the board so chooses to go that route with the city council. I know it's not a common practice, but in a lot of communities, projects like this will bring the permitting bodies together and to really work in a joint effort on this thing.
Yeah, this would have been a good thing for Zork.
That would have been perfect. Yeah. Maybe it'll resurrect it. But those are my points. You know, and we can discuss those at this point and see where we want to go. I would recommend that we would continue this public hearing date specific till our next meeting, which is scheduled for February 11th. And I think staff, planning staff can, you know, work with Lindsay Higgins, city council, and maybe better coordinate what we're planning to do with this between the two bodies and start that process. You know, it's easy to envision this process taking at least 2 or 3 months, maybe longer, you know.
I agree. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal. So the first things I'll take, Director made a recommendation to continue the public hearing to February 11th, 2025. Do I have anybody making
So
that
moved.
motion? Motion by Dave, second by Jim. All those in favor? 7-0. So we will continue the public hearing on this particular item on February 11th, 2025. In terms of the other suggestions by John, I definitely think it's a good idea. I mean, I think this needs a lot of discussion. And you had mentioned John Curran had brought up a couple of good points, which he definitely did, that need to be discussed also. So I'll throw that out there, whether we should form an ad hoc committee or, again, this would be perfect for Zork, 'cause
Yeah.
all that would have been done in that particular context. And that's kind of what you're saying, is
Right.
we're gonna work with the city councils together, sort of like a Zork thing. But
Yeah, and I would like to suggest to the board out loud here, thinking outside the box, maybe the board would like to consider sending a communication to the city council, asking them if they would like to move forward with this proposed zoning ordinance in a collaborative manner, so that we're working together with them if they do form an ad hoc committee, just to review the zoning aspect of it. And then also in regard to traffic, because that will be a major issue that we really have to look at, and make sure we're making the right steps with this proposal traffic-wise, and that it will involve, another major development right across the street. So we may want to start thinking a little bit more long-term. Maybe this applicant would be responsible for a certain amount of traffic improvements, and then the other project would be, it's in the future, but, we know it's coming in the not-too-distant future, and maybe they would be responsible for traffic improvements on the other side of Main Street. But I think if we can start thinking along the lines of, we're really dealing with two projects, and they're going to significantly change the whole appearance, aesthetic value, and property values for the city of Woburn in that area.
yeah, we have to look long-term, because we know it's gonna change.
Right.
Even with this project, if another one comes up. And right now, traffic in that area, especially at rush hour, is like an F. You get off 128 and you come to a stop before you get on Main Street in Woburn. Anybody else like to throw anything out there? Okay, so, I think you and I will discuss the ad hoc thing,
Okay.
and then we'll send it out to everybody, see if they want to.
Yeah, so in any event, we'll have an update for the public hearing on the 11th.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes.
An update insofar as, maybe the council would be glad to work with us on this and make it more of a collaborative effort, and also bring into the discussion, what the city's planning to do in the near future, or is it gonna be the mid-future for that Wyman School property? But I don't think that's really that far off before that'll be going up for auction too. Hasn't been determined yet, but, it's on the table, planning-wise.
So we'll get on all this stuff right ASAP so that we do have information for the public when it comes February 11th.
Okay, and we can always continue the hearing from that point.
We could, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, we all set on that for the moment? Thank you. Thank you. See you guys. Up next is procedural rules governing the planning board. Just so happens that Claudia and I met today, and we took the package that we had along with the changes that we were gonna make for that section, I think 4, 5F, with the time limit for speakers, and we're incorporating that into it. And Claudia and I went over stuff today and made changes where the board had directed us to make changes in the past, and where there were just some grammatical errors, not errors. I've given that to John tonight, and he's gonna have it printed up, Karen. He's gonna have it done up, and we're gonna have the city solicitor take a look at it and make sure that he feels as though everything that we've put in there is correct. Then it will be just given out to everybody here, and we can discuss it briefly at that point and see if you think it's okay. If it is, that's what we'll go with.
And as a side note, I will bring you up to speed with more accurate information having to do with Woodstock. Sometimes things get
The only one.
sidetracked.
The only one on this board, other than me, is probably Dave, that really thinks anything about Woodstock, right? No?
It was 5 miles from there.
Okay, you couldn't get there, right?
No, sitting in a communications trailer, monitoring.
I just couldn't resist.
That's okay, that's quite all right. All right, update on MGL Permit Extension Act, which I think you gave us something that,
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
And basically, from what I could see, it's that anybody that has an extension coming up is gonna get it for 2 years.
Yeah, it's an automatic. So, no one in the development community that's subject to this statute has anything to worry about. They've been granted a 2-year extension. So, the COVID era continues.
Okay, next, planning department updates.
The only thing I'd like to say is that everything's been working really well as far as A&R plans coming in and staff being able to go over them, requesting the chairman to come in and review the plans and then endorsing them. I think that really helps out when we don't have real busy agendas, and rather than coming in for an A&R plan, which for a meeting, yeah, it really isn't necessary. Now, are we going to stay at this slow pace? Probably not, especially with this new rezoning. I think we have another project coming in pretty soon that's going to start picking up the pace of, the length of meetings and involvement. This evening, I thought there would be, a lot more residents and appearance, but it is the winter time. A lot of people aren't even in town, they're down south, if they're lucky, or maybe skiing, whatever, but I was just surprised there wasn't as much, but they did have, as I pointed out in the staff report, They had a long, open public hearing that was 2 or 3 hours long, and everybody was able to express their concerns with the project. Again, I think Mr. Curran did a great job of summarizing and recognizing, you know, not all projects are, say, a wrong fit. This project has a lot of benefits associated with it, most notably, quality housing and the improvement of that particular area of the city. The whole idea is to try to make sure it stays in scale and character with that important area of the city. It's one of the more prominent residential areas, and I don't think it needs all that much change, but it, you know, it could use an improvement, a rehabilitation project. And I think this shows that this can happen, and it's up to us, planners and the city council, to make sure it stays in that scale and character, but also the project remains feasible for the developer. I mean, you can't downsize it to a point where it just doesn't make any sense. But that's all the stuff we can think about and talk about, discuss, deliberate, debate as we go forward.
John, just, do you know what the plan is for the Wyman School? Like, what?
You know, in all likelihood, in what's been discussed, you know, just as potential, they're talking about multifamily senior housing. I don't know if that's even a name, but, you know, a mixed use of resident senior housing as a potential. I think there's a huge segment of the population that's focused in on wanting to make sure that the original part of the Wyman School remains intact, the so-called castle portion of the Wyman remains intact and maybe includes multiple uses. There's been all kinds of proposals bandied about, but they have to make financial sense, especially if the city's going to stay involved. One of the proposed uses is to transform it into a museum, an arts center. You know, it's already set up in classrooms, to make it into a municipal arts and cultural center for, you know, children of the city to be able to go to and, you know, enjoy that type of activity. So, you know, I really think we, you know, as a city, we should put a lot of thought into, you know, what the most appropriate uses are for the original building. You know, what will enhance the quality of life for the residents of Woburn and the kids of Woburn, you know.
Do you know if there's been any offers to buy the site?
There will be, and in all likelihood, it's going to be an open auction process, which the city has been very successful on recently with the 2 fire stations.
Yeah.
This one didn't go for as much as the last one, the North Woburn one, but that has more land involved with it. So there's a lot of uses, you know, that were looked at for that property. It was put out to bid, and it received, I think it was over $700,000 the city received for that property. The Central Square Fire Station, the winning bid was $575,000, which actually went beyond anybody's. We did a little betting on it. I came in way low. I was embarrassed with my the amount I put up, but $575,000 wasn't a bad price for the city. And the bonus is, if this project does move forward, that will straighten out the Clinton Street, Main Street intersection with the a signalized 90-degree intersection, which doesn't exist now. I don't know if you've ever been down to Taunchi's property. That's an offset driveway.
Right, it doesn't, it comes out there, you could sit there.
Coming out of that is a challenge. And then the same with the Boys Club. You know, the Boys Girls Club being able to have a new driveway connecting directly to this 90-degree signalized intersection that's envisioned will be a huge bonus. You know, that's another offset, heavily utilized driveway that will be now better controlled. It'll be a safer intersection.
So based on what we looked at, the new driveway for the Boys and Girls Club would come out to a light?
Yes, yeah, so.
Okay.
Down at that
Which is-
lower elevation of the
Yeah.
boys' club, girls' club, the new driveway would
We'd go this
connect.
way and then come up,
Yeah.
but up top on Main Street, it would actually be a light
Right,
that it would be coming out to.
yeah. Yeah, that's a great improvement. Before the fire station went up for auction, you know, we brought to the city council's attention that, in planning for the future of that whole area, this was an opportunity that the city could work with not only Tachi, but also the boys' club, girls' club, in doing a public improvement that's very much necessary to better control traffic on Main Street. They decided to go out to bid, and, it's all gonna work out. It's all gonna be good, and the city, received a sizable amount of money that they otherwise would not have gotten had we just, planned for the raising of the fire station and the straightening out of the intersection. So, we got double green stamps in that project.
And
I mean, that auction.
just out of curiosity, my own curiosity, what are they doing with the Hurl School? I know it's being torn down.
The Hurls School is being raised, that whole site will be cleaned up.
Yeah.
There's a master plan for that. The city is aggressively seeking full grant funding to create a park.
Okay.
With recreational accessibility and access and usage. But that's been a project that's been planned for the last 3 years, and it's now all coming to fruition. The only thing is we need more money to make it all happen. And it's a federal, state, local collaboration. We're seeking federal funding for that, state funding. And our state rep, or reps, and Congresswoman Clark, we've all been working together to try to acquire the monies necessary to create a beautiful park in that area. So.
Now that you got Kevin, it should go right through.
Oh, yeah, no, things are going really well.
All right, next we have minutes to take care of.
Yes.
We have 2 sets of minutes, October 22nd and December 10th.
So I'll start out with October 22nd. I would make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Motion by Claudia, accept the minutes as submitted for October 22nd. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. All those in favor? 6 for and 1 abstention.
All right, with respect to December 10th, 2024, I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Motion by Claudia to accept the December 10th, 2024 minutes, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? 7 for, 0 against. Is there anything else, Mr. Director? Yeah, we got some stuff, we got something to sign up there.
And can I make one request? Is there a way of sending around meeting dates for the entire 2025 year? So that those of us who need to put them on our calendars can do so that they don't schedule something inadvertently on a meeting day? That would be really, really helpful.
And we'll do that this week.
Awesome, thank you
It'll be
very
sent
much.
Probably tomorrow, we'll send it out. It's not a difficult task to accomplish, we just haven't gotten to it yet. But is everybody still comfortable with this one meeting per month for the time being? Okay. If there's any protest, you can bring that up anytime you'd like. But in the meantime, it's working, and it's really helping us in the planning department, because there's a lot of stuff going on. Tremendous amount of stuff behind the scenes, and, we're fully busy, I would say. But, when the time comes, Claudia, the only exception would be when the time comes that we're anticipating needing more than one meeting a month, we'll give everybody advance warning of that as long as into the future as we can plan, okay?
Great, thank you very much.
All right.
We could have a meeting.
The board members have any questions of staff that you want us to address?
No?
No?
We could have a separate meeting just on this one thing itself.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
With nothing else in that meeting, so that we can just spend time on that one subject.
Yeah, and the ideal thing is, Bob, Mr. Chairman, is, we want to make sure we're being as thoughtful, deliberative as possible, and give a good product for the city council to consider. Hopefully, if board members want to, I'll move forward with trying to, and we already talked about this, see if the council wants to work with us. They may or may not, we don't know at this point in time, but we'll update the board at the next meeting on that. Sound good?
All right, with
Excellent.
that, I would make a motion to adjourn at 8:35.
Motion by Claudia to adjourn at 8:35, second by Dave. All those in favor, all those opposed, 7-0 carries. Thank you.
Four signatures?